Today we will be talking the importance of water versus oil in Utah's food security. Now, in the debate of water versus oil, in regard to that food security, we're going to be talking about the greatest state on earth, and that is the state of Utah. Now, currently, Utah does make their own food supply. We refer to this as self-sufficiency. Now, in regard to our population of 3 billion, no, that's incorrect. 3 million, let's fix that right there. In regard to our population of 3 million, we're only about 2% self-sufficient in regard to vegetables. That means we only make 2% of the vegetables that we consume here in Utah. No, their numbers aren't quite as bad. Only about 3% of the fruit that Utah consumes is produced locally here in the state of Utah. Dairy, we go up to about 26%. Protein, we're doing really well due to cattle ranching. We're at about 134% which means we can export. And grains are about 95%. So you'll see in 4 of the 5 areas, we're in a deficit, which means we have to get that food from somewhere. It doesn't matter how much food we can grow here, it's not going to be enough. Now, we complete that food deficit by having food shipped in from other locations such as California, Central America, and the American Midwest. But of course, you have to ask, how do we get that food? Well, that food is brought to us. In Utah, you can't really fly or send it in on a boat, so you have to bring it in on rail, you have to bring it in by a truck, and those currently are often powered by diesel fuels. They are powered by oil. Thus, we would suggest that oil is more important to the current food security in Utah. As we said before, we can get as much rain as we need, but that won't grow the food. Now, currently, in the year of 2016, we have approximately 3 million people living, but according to estimates, in the year 2050, we will have 6 million people living in the state of Utah. Now, as we discussed, we don't make that food somewhere, so we have to make up for that deficit. But the real question is, where do we get that food? Well, we get that food shipped in. How is it shipped in? Using oil. Now, let's talk about the future for a minute. We talked about self-sufficiency in 2016. But in 2050, what's going to happen? Well, in 2050, the self-sufficiency of all these foods is expected to be cut entirely in half. So only be half of what we currently are self-sufficient in regard to those, which equates to a quarter of what we are now when you do the doubling and the halving. Now, in regard to one particular substance here, let's talk about fruit. Now, in regard to fruit orchards in Utah, between 1987 and 2006, we lost 50% of our fruit orchards due to population growth. By 2050, we're expected to have 0. And that's because we have this expanding growth. Now, you may be thinking, water is important too. Well, Utah's supposed to be getting more water. However, we're going to be using that water for different purposes. That water is going to be utilized to meet the needs of an ever-growing population. It's going to be sourced out into pipelines to meet the need of that population and possibly sent to other states to grow. And that very fertile Wasatch Front where most of our food is grown today, well, that's where going to be all the population is. We can get as much rain as we possibly can there, but without the land to grow food on, we're at a loss. So to complete that deficit, to maintain food security, we need it to be shipped in by the power of oil.